2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn Joe into DFS pros.
Hey guys, welcome to Taco's Fast 40, presented to you by DFSArmy.com. We are getting ready for the Daytona 500, a great American race, the beginning of the NASCAR season. NASCAR is the only sport that starts its season off with its biggest event, and this will probably be the biggest event for NASCAR. As far as DraftKings tournaments, we have that big $20 600K GPP, which is going to be lit, and the combination of a bunch of new players, some fresh fish, the large contest sizes, the plate racing, it all makes for a very juicy race this coming Sunday. And DraftKings just announced that starting tomorrow they will be covering Xfinity. It'll only be a matter of time before the Camping World Truck Series is also included in the NASCAR section, which could possibly be changed to like auto or motorsports or something. So it's nice to see that. We will be covering the Xfinity race starting tomorrow. Qualifying is at 10 tomorrow morning. It should be done around 11, and as soon as we have those, we'll put some projections out. We've got a sheet that goes over, their stats and how often they finish in certain positions, based on last year's data. But there's a lot of new stuff to look at with the Xfinity series. It's going to be interesting diving into that, and there's definitely some edge to be had there. And with Daytona, at least we know how to tackle Daytona when it comes to DraftKings, and usually don't have to do a lot of research. It just depends a lot on qualifying. So we have this week very safely covered, and we'll have the optimizer available for that. So that race is going to be crazy tomorrow. They tend to crash a lot more in the Xfinity series. Looking at last year's race, the average green flag run time was 7 laps, and 33% of the race was run under caution. So lots of crashes to be had there. They're very aggressive in the Xfinity series. They don't really have much to lose, and the mix-up that we see there is pretty similar to the kinds that we see at Daytona in the NASCAR Monster Energy series. We're going to be using the same statistics for both series here. Easy enough, why not? Just looking at the last 10 Daytona races or so and pulling the driver rating, average running position, average finish, lead laps, fast laps, the whole shebang. And then a good look at their track history, just how they've been doing so far in the season, how they do with that type of race. Just looking at those three things will be core: how they do at a track, how they do at a track type, and how they do in general. Just looking at those three things will paint a bit of a picture, especially as the season progresses and we can track who does well at certain types of tracks. But the presence of a few NASCAR drivers each week will kind of really skew the ownership and everything, because everyone knows the NASCAR driver is going to win. Like if Kyle Busch starts an Xfinity races, Vegas odds are typically even money. It's him versus the field. So those salaries will be pretty crazy. We'll see how that looks after next week when you get to a more normal track. But on to the NASCAR race, the big race, the Great American Race, Daytona 500. This will be 200 laps of plate racing, restrictor plate racing. And what that means is that they have inserted a piece into the engine that restricts airflow into the engine, makes everyone's car around the same speed outside of a few guys at the very back that just don't have the budget to put together a good enough car to keep up the pace. But outside of a handful of guys, everyone's going to be running around the same speed, very closely bunched up together. And compared to your average NASCAR race, we see the skill gap decreased significantly in a race like this. And some guys are very good plate racers in particular, sort of like how you see at road courses. But there aren't the special ringer types. I mean, we did have Michael Waltrip, making special trips back to Daytona over the last few years, and we see Danica Patrick doing that this year. And we'll go over the data here in a little bit, but basically this race is pretty freaking random as far as your expected outcome when you start. It's a lot harder to predict how well the good drivers will do because of a few things. First off, the DNF percentage, its crash percentage, is large, and at any given time, there could be a crash that wipes out a good 20, 15 people who are lined up, bump drafting behind each other. And for anyone that doesn't know why they're lined up together, it's a thing that only happens at the two plate races, Daytona and Talladega. But the field will line itself up, usually in 2 lines, sometimes in 3 lines when things get really dicey and people want to try out the middle. But mostly people stay in 2 lines and try to draft behind each other. It's sort of like they create sort of like a slipstream that they slide in between. And if anyone gets out of line, they quickly get shuffled to the back or even have a chance at crashing. We saw that a few times at the duels on Thursday. We saw Ricky Stenhouse get within like a foot of a person driving in their like left rear bumper, and just him getting into the side draft of the car just like immediately spun him out. And we could see a bit of that this week. I mean, things always get really dicey at Daytona, and there's always the big one. Not always. I mean, there's a chance that we could have a fairly clean race, but it's an extremely low chance. And at the end of the race, pretty much always there's going to be people crashing because they just go all out for the win in the final race. And it's sort of almost as if crashing at the end of Daytona is a bit of a tradition for the guys. It's almost kind of expected. And what that means as far as fantasy scoring goes is the guys in the back become a much preferred play than the guys who qualified towards the front for 3 major reasons. The first being place differential scoring. If you start 10th and you finish 9th, then you go up 1 spot, you get 1 place differential point. If you finished 11th and you go down 1, you get -1 place differential points. If you start 40th, then you can't go anywhere but up. So no matter what, you're going to get positive place differential. And the opposite could be said about the pole sitter. The second reason being, of course, that the equipment advantage that the guys in the front usually have is normalized to the guys in the back for the most part. And the third reason being fast laps, which are actually twice as important as lead laps when it comes to dominator points. Those will actually be going to the guys in the back due to how the bump draft works. The guys that are leading all of the laps will pretty much have no fast laps, because it's almost impossible to get a fast lap being the leader, just due to you taking on all of the wind resistance, and of course that being what the group of guys behind you capitalize on. It's not like a regular sort of racetrack where there's no restrictor plate and you can just get out into clean air and run away with it. Looking back at the data from the last 10 races here at Daytona, just looking at where people start and how that affects scoring. If you look at the top 10 starting positions, they average 15 fantasy points. 11th through 20th averages 16 fantasy points. 21st through 30th, there's quite a significant jump here. They average 30 fantasy points. And guys starting 31st or worse average 38 fantasy points. So it's not really a scaling grade. The guys in the top 20 tend to perform around the same. And if we break this down further into 5 position segments, so we don't dilute the sample too much, still a sample of 50 races in each of them, which is pretty good. Going from the 1st through 5th starting position, 13, onto 10th at 16, 11th through 15th, that's 20. And 16th through 20th, for some reason, only averaging 13 fantasy points. Not sure why there's a jump there. I don't think there's any real reason for it, but it just so happens that the guys that have started from 16th through 20th in this race have finished poorly. And the guys starting 21st through 25th, averaging 22 fantasy points. So far, all of these numbers have been pretty similar. It's once you hit 26 where it really starts to jump here. This is pretty interesting. This is going back the last 10 years again. Just looking at guys starting in different segments. Guys who start, well, not segments, sorry. Different starting positions, but guys who start between 26th and 30th starting position average 37 fantasy points. 31st through 35th also average 37 fantasy points, and 46th through 40th average 38 fantasy points. So it's interesting how all these positions kind of score similarly, and if we really go down and break it down by individual position, like last place averages 38 fantasy points. Compare that to the pole sitter, who averages 16 fantasy points, or even worse, the second place starting position averages 3 fantasy points. It's not an exact science that you just want to pick the guys from the very back, just pick 40th through 36th and hit play. It doesn't work exactly like that. It kind of worked like that last year, but the qualifying ended up turning out a little differently this year. Last year we had just a couple of super obvious plays from the back, and they kind of went under-owned. This year, the crowd is a bit wiser, and we have several guys starting from the back that are quite obvious plays, and they will get a bit chalky as, unfortunately, these guys kind of work themselves out into a lineup together. And I can tell you right now, there are going to be like 2 or 3 variations of this lineup that you will see just everywhere in cash. So kind of a forewarning. Just with the way the numbers work themselves out this year, it's going to be different than years past. Before, we'd be picking from the Gray Galdings and Corey LaJoys of the world starting back in the very back, but with the presence of all of these good plays being in the very back, it's kind of pushed that crap tier up into like the 30s and 20s to where you really don't want to play Gray Galding starting 34th or LaJoy 32nd or Justin Marks 29th, or the worst of all of them is Jeffrey Earnhardt 27th. But like those plays don't really matter. Those were kind of the plays that you used for leverage last year. Now with most of the plays being extremely obvious down low, you're going to have to think a little bit differently in GPP. We'll still be able to take advantage of the public who uses guys starting in the top 10, top 15, but I don't think you're going to be able to get as much of an edge this year. Those guys are going to lose anyways. You're really playing against the other NASCAR players that played last year, or at least people that are informed by people that played last year. You're probably really up against a lot of other like optimizer projections and whatnot. So this might be the year to get away from some of this chalk, especially with how awful it's going to be. I mean, we saw it in full display at the Clash, where an 80% owned Keselowski, or 100% depending on what tournament you were in. But he finished like dead last. He crashed right at the end there, and that screwed over a lot of people. I mean, if you didn't have Keselowski, you automatically cash pretty much. We saw it get a little bit out of whack there, and we also saw a bunch of people playing Jamie McMurray who had just crashed in the Clash before that. So a lot of people were trying to be sneaky and take advantage of a guy that had just crashed, and I had even heard him being talked about as an under-owned play, but obviously everyone was on the same page there, and he ended up being super chalk and did pretty well. So we got to think about things like that. Ownership percentage is going to be important this week, and that is up on the research station for you to check out. And I'll be talking about that a lot as we go through the field here. Let's get started with position number 1, the pole sitter, Alex Bowman. he was 25% owned in the duel that he started on the pole in, and it was just hilarious. As you got higher in entry fee, he ended up working his way down to like 5% when it comes to ownership. But his ownership is just hilarious in like the lower dollar contests, because even Jeff Gordon was saying before the race that there's no way Bowman was going to do anything to crash his pole sitting car. So he played it safe and just drifted right to the back. He wasn't racing for anything, because the way they have it set up is the pole sitter from qualifying is the pole sitter no matter what, but everyone else has to fight for their spot in the clash. Like, they're basically qualifying for the clash, or not the clash, sorry, the duels, and then the duels determine the qualifying order after that. Well, Bowman didn't have anything to race for, so we saw the entire race. He just drifted right to the back. And we all knew he was going to do it, or at least people that have seen these clashes before, especially with a rookie like Bowman. You know darn well he wasn't going to drive that thing. And this week, everyone learned their lesson. We saw a very low-owned Austin Dillon who started on the pole at the Clash. He was about 9% owned, and that's what we have Bowman at right now, is about 9% in the ownership projections. And it's not going to be like last year with Dale Earnhardt Jr. at around like 23%. Those guys all got very screwed. And we had seen this a lot, actually, with some of the pole sitters here in years past. When Ricky Stenhouse won and he started off with a pole, he was actually not in the winning lineup, even though he'd started on the pole, led about like 20 laps and won. He wasn't in the starting lineup, or the winning lineup. So we could really skip this whole part up top, the first few starting positions. But yeah, Alex Bowman, he's basically going to separate you from the rake. Like, if his ownership just so happens to break like 15, 17%, whatever it is, that's the rake in your contest, then you automatically pass the rake and you win, because there's basically no way in hell that Bowman is going to be in the winning lineup, and chances are he just goes backwards and scores very low, or he crashes and he scores like -30 and just completely ruins anyone that rosters him. And if people know that, that's why he's not going to be popular. The people who only play the Daytona 500 will definitely remember the times that they've rostered Dale Earnhardt Jr. and thought, yeah, I'm not doing that. And even if they were to, I don't think a green guy like Bowman would be the guy, even though his salary is $7,500. People would be more inclined to take Denny Hamlin, who's always been excellent at the 500, and who just won the 500 by an inch in 2016 over Martin Truex Jr. Might as well jump to him. He's starting second here. And like I said, people are a little bit more willing to take him. If he wins, I suppose that he could be in the winning lineup going from second to first, and I'd assume he'd lead some laps. He would really need to win in order to pay off. So I like just the smallest possible sprinkle of Hamlin just in case, because he can win this thing. But nothing more than like 3%. Really, just play 0% of it. Any of these guys up here, unless you're massive multi-entering. I wouldn't touch Hamlin unless you're playing more than like 20 lineups. If you're doing like 20 max, I would play like one Hamlin lineup. Same kind of goes for Blaney. I know that Penske has dominated so far in Speed Weeks, just absolutely dominated. They went 1-2-3 in the Clash and 1-2-3 in the duel. Blaney was involved in that, ended up winning the duel, even though Logano led all of the laps. He made a move at the end there and got himself into victory lane. Will be starting third, and he could definitely lead some laps to begin with. We have him projected about even with Hamlin and Elliott. All these guys have about around the same chance of leading laps, but it's not really going to matter. It's going to get all mixed up, and who knows who ends up taking the lead up there. Maybe if a guy like Keselowski or Logano started in the very front, we'd be able to safely guess that they would lead. a pretty large chunk of laps, but I don't see it. I really doubt that anyone's going to lead a ton of laps, and even if someone does, it's going to be almost impossible to guess who that is. And you're much, much better off fading them, because unless they do win and lead a crap ton of laps, they're just absolutely not going to kill you. And chances are they end up upside down. I did forget to talk about a bit of the DNF percentages. There's something interesting that I had seen when looking at the starting position averages. I added DNFs to the mix, and the guys starting 1st through 10th, the top 10, their DNF percentage is about 36%. The guys starting in the bottom 10 are right under 30%. And specifically, the guys 36 through 40th, they actually only crash at a 26% rate compared to like the guys 11th through 15th and 6th through 10th. They're around 40%. Not entirely sure why that is. I guess it's because the better drivers like race harder or something. I don't know. I don't really have a hypothesis here. This is just what the data is telling me. And you can see it for yourself in the positional summary tab on the research station, DNF percentage, and we can also see that the pole sitters only crash 20% of the time, or 2 of the 10 races. The last places crash half of the time though. But overall, starting 25th and worse, those guys rarely crash. So just another reason to play these guys starting from the back. But yeah, back into the field order here. Moving on to Chase Elliott, starting 4th, 2-time defending dual champion. And he managed to defend a title of an exhibition race before winning, or an actual race on the NASCAR Cup circuit. I think that's hilarious. It makes a lot of sense. I grew up a big fan of Bill Elliott, so full disclaimer here, I'm slightly biased towards Chase, like a lot of people are. I'd assume Bill was very popular in his day, and people have been waiting for Chase to race in NASCAR for quite a while. And then, like his dad, I liked his dad a lot towards his later years. And back when he wasn't winning a lot, he kind of raced like Jeff Gordon towards the end there, where he would just run around in the top 10 all day long but never win, or rarely win. And Chase has dominated a fair amount. We saw him lead tons of laps last year and even the year before that. We've never seen him win. He's been in position to win, and then he'll get passed with like 2 or 3 laps to go, or there'll be a crash or a caution or something will happen. Always a bridesmaid with Chase Elliott. And starting 4th, I mean, he could definitely break through here. Anything will be better than his first time out, where he just crashed immediately in 2016. He followed it up last year with a good 500, finished 14th, but starting 4th, again, almost no reason to play him. He just won the duel. People will play him. Chase Elliott always gets over-owned because he's a guy that everybody likes. No reason to play Elliott, in my opinion. Joey Logano starting 5th. He is driving a Penske Ford, which we know is incredibly fast. Ford looks absolutely dominant in speed weeks, every Ford. This is one of the few, I think this is the first time that I've ever actually recommended playing a top 5 guy at a plate race, just because Joey Logano is in such a great place to smash. We saw him set the record for most laps led at a dual race. He led almost every single lap until the very end there. And he started like 6th and led, I don't think he led the first lap. He almost did, but he definitely led the second lap. Like, it was just utter dominance from him. Now, there's a chance with Blaney and Logano starting 1-2, well, right in front of each other, that, right behind not Blayman, I'm so sorry, I mix these guys up. Bowman, who's in front of Blaney. With Bowman, Blaney, Logano being 1, 2, 3, there's a very good chance that they just push right out to the edge here. Like Hamlin, I don't think he has a prayer, and some recent Vegas odds have suggested that they're not huge on Toyota whatsoever right now. But This 1-2-3 of Bowman, Blaney, Logano is definitely going to push out to the instant lead. And I know that Blaney is out in front there, so you might be tempted to play Blaney for the dominator points here. It's just that like top 5 is a threshold where, looking back, obviously an average of 15.6 lead laps, that's not bad, but also an average of 13 fantasy points. Like only 20% of the time they score more than 40. You're going to need more than 50, I think, from the pole sitter to have or from a top 5 guy to have a decent day, and only 8% of the time they score over 50. I mean, that's really rough. Compare that to guys starting 36, their worst, who hit 50 36% of the time. It's not comparable. So even though Blaney is right in front of Logano here starting off, Logano is just barely within the threshold of starting place where I might consider playing him. That, and he obviously has much better pedigree than Blaney, who's his rookie, or he is not a rookie. I'm sorry, this is his rookie year for Penske. He's finally moved up from Wood Brothers Racing to race for Penske, and Paul Menard would be taking his old car at Wood Brothers. But with Blaney being the official third driver for the Penske squad, he's still a rookie. He's still the young gun. He won't like defer to Logano or anything. I think he'll lead some laps once he gets past Bowman. It's just that things get shuffled up so much, and ultimately I see Logano panning out a lot better than Blaney, because Logano is seriously good. Won the 2015 500 and is also incredible at Talladega when he doesn't crash, and he doesn't even crash that often, honestly. He's just very good at staying out towards the front in plate races. And yeah, I'm just not going to play Blaney for dominator points when he would really need to absolutely win and lead everything. Is where Logano has a little bit more leeway, and he is more likely to dominate and lead everything compared to Blaney. And then we get to 6th place, 6th starting position here. Kevin Harvick had a little bit of line movement. I saw just moving a bit backwards, even though he's driving a Ford. Not sure what the deal is there, but not going to be huge on Harvick this week because these big name drivers tend to get a little bit more ownership when so much of the public is involved. And I feel like Harvick is one of those names where he's definitely popular enough to where people at least know that he is a good driver and has won a championship recently and things like that, along with like the likes of Kyle Busch, Dale Jr., etc. Kevin Harvick, despite the fact he's driving a Ford, I guess the Stewart-Haas's obviously aren't cooking with the same sauce that Penske is. And we didn't really see that mind-blowing speed from Stewart-Haas like we did Penske, although Bowyer did look pretty good. But that's honestly who I'd rather play over Harvick is Bowyer, just like straight up. He's just starting too high. And we'll say that about the first 15 guys here. But yeah, it's just qualified too high. Darrell Wallace Jr., or Bubba Wallace, as you may have heard him called, starting 7th. He did extremely well, extremely well at the duels. Very impressed by Bubba, but starting 7th, you can't really play him. I know he's in the 43 Ford, the Richard Petty racing machine, really the most iconic car outside of maybe the Intimidator 3, the number 43 Richard Petty Smithfield racing machine. But and Almirola was just great. He was always a great plate racer in that car. I mean, I would love Bubba if he finished, or if he started anywhere outside of the top 15 maybe, but starting 7th, no, there's no way he dominates this race. No chance. I'm not playing any Bubba. Sorry. Maybe next race. The same can pretty much be said for Eric Jones here, starting 8th. He looked, last time at Daytona, he finished 9th. Very good for him. But if he were to do that here, he'd go backwards one position and not score anything. Yeah, he's not dominating this race. Again, not liking any of these plays in this range, to be quite honest, and I won't for a little while. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., two-time plate race winner last year. He kind of breaks the threshold of 0% ownership. He might be like Hamlin, where you may want a sprinkle of him. If you're multi-entering Stenhouse, of course he's a great plate race driver. Obviously, won a few last year. We saw him being very aggressive throughout the duel and the clash over Speed Week so far. And honestly, he's been kind of all over the field. I think he's just messing around through a lot of the duel and the clash, to be quite honest, because he was all over the place. Like, he was diving in the middle when he had like no reason to. I guess just getting a feel for things. He really does have that speed. Second fastest in the second practice, if that matters. It doesn't really. I wouldn't even look at practice times, but it makes a lot of sense that he would be the second fastest because he's just always been great at these plate races. But starting 9th, I can't get too invested in it. Clint Boyer starting 10th. I really could use me some Boyer. He finished second last year at the fall race, or I guess the summer race, the second race. And going back to the last 10 races here, he has 6 top 11 finishes. No, actually, never mind. He has 7 top 11 finishes in his last 10 races. The other 3 races, all crashes. Or DNFs of some sort, like 33rd and worse. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I can tell you with 99% certainty that the 42nd place finish in 2014 was probably a crash. But yeah, Boyer, very, very good plate racer. Starting 10th, I'm going to own him a lot more than I would some random dude starting 10th. That is for sure. Not going to be high owned. I really don't see him breaking double-digit ownership. He was very, very good in the second duel. And heck, maybe that might push a little bit of ownership onto him, but man, I wish he started farther back than 10th. But for a 10th place guy, I really love it. But that kind of really love, I don't know how much ownership or how much exposure I will be using of him just because of how you need to attack these slates. Honestly, you just can't be spending time picking guys from the top 10, and usually you only want to pick like one in each given lineup. And I guess if I had to pick any of them, it would be Clint, but I'm going to try to limit my exposure in general to the top 15 and especially the top 10. Yeah, as we move on to the 11th starting position with Kurt Busch, followed closely by his brother, Kyle Busch, in 12th. These are two guys that I'm just not a huge fan of this week, and there's no real reason to be, but I feel like people will play at least Kyle. Kyle Busch will garnish. Garner? I guess it was Garner. Hopefully it doesn't garnish anyone's wages. Well, never mind, actually. I hope he garnishes other people's wages and delivers them to me by not playing him. Because I'm not going to play Kyle Busch. I mean, people are going to look at the top-end guys here, and outside of the ones that start in the very back, Kyle Busch is the one that seems like he's in the best spot, I guess, of all of these guys starting up high. Looking at Chase, Kevin, Harvick, Logano, Hamlin, Blaney. He's the lowest of this group because there aren't any studs for a little bit till you get to Truex down 24th. So Kyle Busch starting 12th will definitely be more owned. Like, his ownership percentage will be higher than the likelihood that he's in the winning lineup or even just scores well in general. I'd say it's definitely under 18%. Chances are he's just gonna go backwards or crash or something. I'd say he's at a slightly higher crash risk than most drivers because he's Kyle Busch. Relatively quiet over speed weeks, but there was something I wanted to bring up here Looking at the prop bets for this week, there's a prop bet for manufacturer to win. And surprising that Ford actually isn't the favorite there. They have Chevy as a slight favorite at plus 115 over Ford plus 125. But Toyotas are plus 300. They really don't like Toyota this week. And I guess Vegas Vegas doesn't have any reason to lie to me, I guess. I mean, it is based on public money. I guess public money really does like Chevy quite a bit, but I don't know. I guess even with Hamlin starting up near the front, the live odds as of right now, I just do not like a Toyota victory whatsoever. And that makes sense if you've been watching through the speed weeks. Toyota started 1, 2, 3 in the duel, and they ended up giving it up to Chase Elliott, who took the lead from Hamlin and never gave it back. So yeah, I guess I'm just not really high on any Toyotas really, and it's hard not to be just super high on the Fords after seeing the duels. It is important to note that I guess it might just have something to do with Bowman being on the pole, but yeah, right now Chevy is just a slight favorite over Ford, and I almost kind of want to go put a bet on it because I'm pretty sure that a Penske Ford is going to win this race. But if they don't, it would definitely be a Chevy because, I don't know, I could eat crow here. I just don't see any of the JGR teams don't tend to do that great at plate races in general, and they're going to be so experimental or freaky. I guess it could fall backwards into a victory here, but I really doubt it. We've seen their aggressive strategies just kind of like come back to bite them, and Penske is better at doing that anyway. I don't know. I'm just not huge on Toyotas this week. I wouldn't just straight fade them all, especially if they're starting in the back or if they're just a second-tier Toyota team. But none of the JGR guys qualified in any sort of position where you'd play them, so it's kind of really easy to hate them. Moving on to the 13th starting position, Ryan Newman, who came 5th last year in the second race here at Daytona, P-Night race, and did pretty well at the duel as well. I guess he just kind of hung on. I think he finished 4th, if I'm not mistaken. Starting 13th still, but he does have a good track history here and a good average finish of 16th. But that would still move you down 3 spots. It's just starting 13th, you can't really do it. A lot of the same analysis for a lot of the guys. I know that $6,600 is a very, very cheap price for Ryan Newman. Very affordable, but man, starting 13th, you just can't really do it. Austin Dillon starting 14th. Again, no real interest. He was very, very good at Daytona specifically, although the last few races haven't really gone his way. But before that, he had 3 top 10 finishes in a row. And actually an average finish at Daytona of 15.2. Average driver rating is 75. I mean, that is not shabby. And $7,900 is pretty good for him at a race like this, but starting 14th, no, I just don't really have any interest. David Reagan starting 15th. I know he is a good plate racer, and he actually looked pretty solid at the duel to get this qualifying spot, but no. Starting 15th, absolutely no. Maybe if he's starting 35th, but not 15th. No, not for David Reagan. Paul Menard starting 16th. I really like this play. I like it a lot. Practices don't matter, but, he was fast alongside plenty of other very good, very fast Fords out there. And we saw his speed was on display at the second duel there. We saw him pushing for the lead. And he never ended up getting it, but boy, the change of team for him is apparent, at least at this plate race so far. Menard's never, ever really been one to fight for the lead and all that. Yeah, I know it's a plate race, but the move to the Wood brothers from RCR, I know he's changing manufacturer, and that may be a little bit, there may be some growing pains like you saw last year when Stuart Haas made the switch to Ford, but Menard seems to be in a much better place. His car is obviously a lot better, And this is a guy who finished top 5 in both Daytona races last year. Driver rating of 76 over the last 10 races. And has even led a handful of laps and has a decent amount of fast laps. I mean, starting 16th, I guess this just barely breaks the top 15 threshold you like to think of. I know it's completely arbitrary, but Menard really is in a good spot here at 16th. I think he's going to be very low owned. I don't see a lot of people piling onto him. And for that reason, I do like him quite a bit. I think he has what it takes to get another top 5 finish here. Starting 14th, or my bad, not 14th. Man, I'm a bit off here. 17th, Daniel Suarez. Top 20 last year at this race. 29th at the 500. Last year he was a rookie. I think he's just more suited for like short tracks and road racing and stuff. I don't see him as that great of a plate racer. And just being a JGR Ford, I already expressed my opinions on them earlier, so I'm not going to be playing much, if any, Suarez. Although I guess 17th is enough to. I mean, it's low enough to where I won't have a complete fade, but they'll be somewhere between like 3 and 5% ultimately with Suarez. Trevor Bayne starting 18th. He is someone who has definitely seen his share of plate racing success. He has a win under his belt, 3rd in 2016, and another top 10 finish last year at this race, and he was a constant factor in the top 10. Like, he would always be up there. He tends to crash a lot historically, which is true, but when he's not crashing, he really is posting these top 10 finishes. And Roush has historically been very, very fast with him and Ricky Stenhouse and Biffle before. They always have done very well at plate races. So Bayne is someone I'm circling a little bit. We saw him be quite chalky, actually, at the second duel, starting in the 10th position out of 20, which is a little bit surprising. So I guess the word is definitely out with Bayne being a good plate racer. And it's apparent from his track history alone. His driver rating actually is pretty poor, and he's never really led any laps here, but I think the driver rating being poor is just due to him having a lot of unfortunate early accidents. I mean, it happens to everybody, but, Bayne is someone I really do like in GPP because, again, I think he's going to be under 15% owned, honestly, and they can create quite a bit of value for you. And starting 18th, if you have like a top 10 finish, that's pretty good, and a top 5 finish is very good. I think he has the upside. He has the upside to give you what you need starting 18th. Not the most preferable play, obviously, one you want only a little exposure of, but not a terrible play. Jamie McMurray starting 19th. His car has looked very good over the week. He shot up to the front and contested in his duel, even after ruining everyone's day at the Clash. And it was very weird to see him being so ridiculously under-owned in the Clash, only to be ridiculously over-owned at the duel when he was second to last starting in the Clash, but at the duel he was starting 12th out of 20th, which it isn't really that great. I guess it's because everyone was thinking the same thing. He had just crashed. I'm going to be sneaky. I'm going to play him. It does not work out that way. Who knows where his ownership will really end up, but he's definitely someone that you think of when you think of Daytona. He doesn't have the finishes really, but he does have an extremely good driver rating, 81. Compare that to Trevor Bayne's 62, even though Trevor Bayne has the better finishes here. So McMurray, very good plate racer, very good at keeping himself in the top 5, just posted like a lamppost. Not really one to lead you laps. He averages three lead laps per race, so it's not like he can't at all. He does a little bit, but It doesn't really matter if they lead laps or not here anyway. Once you get past the first 10 guys, it's really just about them surviving and moving up, hopefully. McMurray can do that for you, but he is still in the upper half of the field. AJ Allmendinger, right smack dab in the middle at 20th. I guess technically him and Jamie McMurray share the middle of the field there, but Allmendinger starting 20th, top 10, both races last year at Daytona. And if you're having any salary issues, he's only $5,900, which is a very excellent price. I know that most lineups you will be leaving money on the table, so it won't matter all too much. But man, Allmendinger is very affordable. I don't think they'll make him popular necessarily, because starting 20th, he's really good. I think he's going to go under the radar for sure. I mean, his practice times were horrible, and I don't really care about it. So was he's starting right next to his teammate Chris Buescher, who also had really terrible practices, and it's not like they were slow. Allmendinger worked his way up in the duels, ended up getting shifted back a little bit towards the end, but it wasn't like his speed wasn't there. He kept up with the pack pretty darn well. The difference between Allmendinger and Buescher here that I noticed is that Allmendinger's odds are 35-1 compared to Buescher's at 100-1. They both finished top 10 last race, but Buescher crashed his first 3 times at Daytona. I don't think either of them are going to be that highly owned. I especially think Buescher is going to have some very, very low ownership. But starting 21st, I don't know if I'd play Buescher, but I would play me some Allmendinger because I think that he has what it takes to finish top 10 for sure. And the last 6 years here, he has finished no worse than 21st. So he's probably going to stay where he is or move up. And if he just stays right where he's at, he's going to score about 25 fantasy points, which is a decent floor. Move up a little bit, and you could definitely see him in the winning lineup if he finishes top 6 or top 5. So that's a very good play right there for GPPs. Another very good one that I see here is Michael McDowell starting 22nd. I like him a lot, and I think he's going to be very low owned. People do know that he's just switched race teams recently. He gave the number 95 up to Casey Kane, and he will be riding Landon Castle's old car, the number 34 Front Row Motorsports Ford, and it's not like he had any good car last year, really. It's kind of a lateral move. Him and Castle had about the same sort of equipment, but he is probably the best example of a restrictor plate ringer in this track or in this field. His last 4 finishes have all been in the top 15. He also has a couple of top 10 finishes in 2014 and 2013 as well. He did crash on the second race of 2013, and if you get rid of that last place finish crash, then he finished top 15 in the 6 out of 7 races. So essentially, I guess you could say he finished top 15 in 6 of the 7 races that he finished here at Daytona. Going back to this last generation of car, very, very good plate racer, and I think that's going to go very, very overlooked. So I'm going to be very, very overweight on one Michael McDowell. I like him a lot. I think he's moving upwards. Even if he just sticks in the middle of the field and does okay and survives, that's going to be good enough for you. And he tends to stay in the front half of these packs. He can definitely hang. And he's just someone I'm going to be targeting in GPP quite a bit to get a leverage off of what I assume will be his under 15% ownership. Ty Dillon, also another target of mine, starting 23rd. Looked very good last year at this race. Ended up finishing 16th. Looked even better at Talladega, where he almost won the thing. It was wild. Very good plate racer in the Xfinity series as well. And honestly, I know it doesn't really matter, but his practice times were kind of eye-opening. He hung well at the duel. moved himself up to the top 5 and stayed there for quite a while. It is fine to see him being up there with the other big name guys. Just through a good portion of that race, ended up getting shuffled back a bit, to the delight of me, as 23rd is a good enough spot for me to use him as just sort of a GPP pivot off of some of the guys in that, well, not really in that range, but just off of guys in general. He's not going to garner the most ownership. I really can't see him going over 20%, and crash avoidance is something that I would argue is his best skill. Last year, he finished the highest percentage of laps of any driver in NASCAR. He had significantly more lead lap finishes than anyone in his tier of equipment. Like anyone that wasn't on a major race team, his lead lap finishes were just miles ahead of. So he just has a good nose for avoiding crashes. Of course, there are a lot of crashes here that nobody can avoid. Man, I really like Ty Dillon for what it's worth. Starting 23rd, I don't think he's going to get owned by the public, and I don't think he's going to be owned by the DFS community either, as they're just going to be piling onto the guys in the back. So I really do like Ty Dillon. Martin Truex Jr. starting 24th. It's a good spot for him, and he's definitely someone you can use in your core. I don't really like him as much. I know he's not the greatest plate racer. I know he almost won the Daytona 500 a couple of years ago, but it was a little bit fluky, I guess. We've seen him crash a lot here. He has 5 crashes in the last 4 years at Daytona. I guess the last 9 races he has 4 crashes and 1 other DNF. And it's not like I want to overvalue track history here. I just know that at restrictor plates, they're just not his bread and butter. He's definitely more of a fan of the large oval. And he's going to be a very, very popular name for the public. He's the defending champion. I just think that he is going to be well over-owned. Just more owned than he should be. And it's not like he's going to be a name that people pick out to fade specifically. That's going to go more to your Kyle Larsons, your Keselowskis. But Truex is someone that I personally will be underweight on. But just looking at it from, just names aside, just looking at numbers and data here, he would seem like someone that you would want to play, just qualified a bit low for how good of a racer he is in general. I don't know. I guess it's just the Toyota thing with the odds and him not looking good at the Clash or I guess he looked okay at the Clash, but he did not look good at the duels at all. I don't know, like he just didn't do anything. He just kind of hung out in the back there the whole time. But yeah, moving on to 25th starting position here, Brendan Gaughan, who's been in the nuts a couple races in a row here at Daytona, starting in the very back and moving all the way up to 11th and 7th, respectively. He is more of an Xfinity name, so you'll get to know him over the weeks as Xfinity progresses. Very, very, very good plate racer. I guess he's another one of these ringer types. Starting 25th, he's not going to be as obvious as last year, obviously, but I think he comes in incredibly under-owned for his value, and yeah, that's really all that I have to say about him. He's just going to come in under-owned, so I'm going to own him a little bit extra, but not going to go crazy with him starting 25th. It's not like he's starting 35th, but I don't know. I think I kind of would prefer him starting a little bit higher and just having the lower ownership, because this year, playing the guys at the very bottom, I mean, you are going to do it with like 3 or 4 or 5 of your spots in your roster. Just in general, you do want to keep it to these guys at the bottom, but I do like hedging out to other plays like a Gong or a Kane, a Ty Dillon, Michael McDowell, these kind of plays around here, just in GPP to get off of just having all guys from the bottom, because everyone is going to be doing that. I'm telling you, you have to kind of mix in some of these mid-20s guys, and I like Brendan Gaughan a lot for that. I think he could sneak into the nuts for a third year in a row and give you a nice little payday there at the end of the race, assuming he survives. And he's been lucky so far. The NASCAR gods have granted him access to the top 12, but we'll see if that continues on this year. Kasey Kahne starting 26th. Well, people are off of him, at least going by the clash and duel and looking at the ownerships. People don't like Kasey Kahne right now. He is no longer a part of Hendricks Motorsports. He's taken Michael McDowell's car in the 95 for Levine Family Racing. I don't know exactly how that will fare throughout the year, to be quite honest, but at a plate race, it doesn't really matter. He's had some success here in years past. He has had a thing for crashes, but when he's not crashing, he tends to finish top 10 oftentimes. Good driver rating, 81, right there with Jamie McMurray. So, really, I think that more people are going to play McMurray than Kahne, even though McMurray is starting 7 spots ahead of Kahne. So I think that just creates a straight-up one-for-one like pivot value right there. I really do like that a lot. Starting 26 is good enough for me, and if the ownership is going to be underweight with Kahne, I really do like getting on him then. We can skip over the 27th starting position because that's Jeffrey Earnhardt. No, don't play him. Danica Patrick making her racing the first race after her retirement. So kind of not really pulling a Jeff Gordon here, but she's coming back to do a few of these Daytona races, and she will be doing it for Tommy Baldwin Racing, riding the number 7 that Elliott Sadler's supposed to be riding around here. And I would love to play me some Sadler. Don't get me wrong, but Danica Patrick will be just fine. She's starting 28th, which is very good for her, and it's going to be harder to project her performance with her obviously not being in a Stewart-Haas machine. So the expectations are going to be less than usual, but starting 28th, there's still upside here. I kind of like her as just kind of like a mix and match sort of play to get off of the super chalk guys here, but $5,600, very, very affordable. So if you need to jam in Keselowski, Johnson, Larson together, Patrick definitely not a bad option. And she starts far back enough away from her now ex Ricky Stenhouse that it will be interesting to see if the announcers mentioned anything about that when introducing the drivers just randomly throughout the race. I feel like that's something Darrell Waltrip would bring up. But moving right along here, 29th starting position, Justin Marks. I guess for some reason, like, someone must have put a bunch of money on Justin Marks or something, because his Vegas odds are a bit off for a while. They're back to normal. He's 100-1, so looking better than the likes of DJ Kennington, Gray Galding, guys like that. But I don't think he's any sort of special play. I mean, we don't really know anything about him. He's never raced in NASCAR before. We do know his car, though. He is driving the number 51 Rick Ware Racing Chevy. And yeah, I know he managed to qualify outside of the top 30 with him. Props for that. But yeah, that team is on quite the budget. And it's just every driver we saw last year for Rick Ware Racing, be it like BJ McLeod or Timmy Hill, just no. Miss me with all of those drivers. No. Then, next we have DJ Kennington. Another no. 29 driver rating at Daytona. 38th and 36th. Last year at his first 2 races here. No. Gonna be a no from me, dog. Brad Keselowski. Now, he's going to be a yes from tons of people. He's going to be the chalk, somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% ownership. Has an 89 driver rating at Daytona, one of the best marks in the field. In fact, the only 3 people, only 3 people better than him at Daytona, according to driver rating, would be Jimmy Johnson and Clint Bowyer. And a lot of his success has been recent success, as Penske has absolutely dominated most of the restrictor plate races of the last few years. Keselowski is going to be a super obvious play to everybody. In cash, he should be about 100% owned, starting 31st. He is certainly going to move up to the top of the field. He is the odds-on favorite to win still, even after the fact. And he is 7-1, and no one's close to him. His teammate Logano is 12-1 right now to win. Hamlin's the second favorite at 9-1, but Keselowski is the clear favorite to win, and he is starting 31st. So that is 30 points of place differential if he wins. That would be the absolute nuts. He wouldn't need to lead. He wouldn't need to lead a single lap. He doesn't even need to win. He just needs to come like top 5, and he's a lock. Even at a $10,000 salary, that is a lot of fantasy points for not only the finishes, say first he gets 46, but also moving up 30 spots. That's 76 right there. He doesn't need to lead a single lap, because looking back at the last few optimal lineups here last year, optimal lineup scored 66, 65, 63, 62, 58, 58. Year before that, 59 was the lowest scoring. At the Daytona 500 last year, even one before that, 51 fantasy points. That was at the night race, actually. There were 100 less miles and like 30 some less laps and that. But really, at the 500, you're really shooting for a fantasy point output of about 70 to 80 for those guys that are going to be like the nuts plays. And he doesn't need any dominator points for that. He just needs to come like top 5. Starting 31st. Has that 3 in front of it, so there's a little bit of that sales tactic-y thing. You know how there's like a huge difference between guys that start 29th and guys that starts 30th. Well, he's right there at the edge. He's technically a bottom 10 play, even though he's at the very top of the bottom 10. But he's a bottom 10 play. Going to be obvious for everybody. Most people will just hit lineup and then see Brad Keselowski and play him immediately, seeing the 31 next to his name. Same will go for Jimmy Johnson here and Kyle Larson. These 3 are going to be incredibly obvious. Now, he will be going to a backup car, but it doesn't matter much. Penske is an elite racing team. They probably could shit out like 5 cars half as good in their sleep. I guess if they were sleeping, they would be about half as good, but still, their backup car is pretty much the same as their car they brought here with the intention of racing. I mean, the only really of all the guys that got sent to the back, only Gilliland and Thompson, maybe Di Benedetto, something to worry about with their replacement cars. But Keselowski, he would need a crash in order to not return value, pretty much, is how it looks. And this week we've seen Penske look even more dominant than we have in years past, at least so far, and everything like practice, the duels. And who knows, maybe that doesn't even, or maybe his backup car is shitty or has a problem or something. I mean, there are enough reasons to fade him, and his chalky ownership is going to be reason number 1. So if you want to fade him, you can go that route. But if you do want to play it safe, play Keselowski. I really can't recommend just jamming in like 80-some%. Because who knows, the ownership with him could get wacko. It could get into like the 65% territory, and you're not going to be able to leverage crap out of that. I think you either go all in on him, which can only help you so much. It won't separate you from too much of the field, only the dum-dums, which you probably are going to be separated from anyway. Or you could just fade him or go underweight to the field on him and gain leverage that way. I think that's going to be the way you have to go. I think I'm just going to roll like 50% Keselowski myself. Although it really is hard to just not go all in on something that seems as sure of a bet as it is, even though we've literally just been presented with evidences or evidence to the contrary of how that could go awfully wrong. And if you played the duel, you know that could go awfully wrong. But still, he's chalky enough to where, just like the duel, you could just play him and cash still, like a lot of the field did. But the downside here is going to be twofold, with the field being twice as big. But starting 31st, I think that's kind of the reason I'm leaning more towards the underweight on Keselowski. It's not like he's starting dead last where he has no floor. He can still put up a negative score if he just crashes and finishes last. That could definitely happen, especially with an aggressive driver like Keselowski. You know that he will be knifing his way through this field, and kind of a risky endeavor with how we've seen people get turned around as they get out of line. Although, I mean, most of the people will be deferring to him on the way up, but once he hits the Ryan Newmans and Stenhouses of the world, he will be in for, I guess, I wouldn't say a world of hurt, but man, he was putting them in a world of hurt the way he was knifing through the clash, so I don't know. We'll see with him, but the expected outcome is that he moves up through the field and finishes well. But there is, if you look at, he's starting, 33rd? Yeah, so guys who start between 30th and 33rd, 30th and 35th, they have a 32% DNF rate, so 1 out of 3 times here he'll crash. Just comparing that to, I mean, that is around the field average of about 34% DNF rate. And you can think that for really any driver. I mean, shoot, the driver starting between 6th and 15th, they have over a 40% DNF rate. But just think, if a guy is going to crash a third of the time, does it help me to be over or underweight on this guy given his position? And where Keselowski's at right now, I think the field is going to do it about right. His DNF percentage will probably be right around, well, I guess if you were to add his DNF percentage and his ownership, that'd probably add up to about 100%, which seems about right. I don't think going crazy on Keselowski is doing anything more than going to a roulette table and playing the 1 through whatever, the one that gives you like a 1 out of 3 odds. I really just like playing Keselowski at the field level, maybe just a bit underneath, like I said, for him being not all the way in the very back, and him maybe possibly putting him in spots where he could crash or something that'll get him shuffled back or upside down or whatever the case is. I think Keselowski has enough of a chance to do that for me to want to go a little bit underweight to him. But really, I want to make most of my leverage decisions on just not playing the stupid guys. You know, I don't care about gaining 20% advantage over the field by playing extra Keselowski. I'd rather just be not playing Ryan Blaney or not playing Bubba Wallace and Alex Bowman, those guys. Going on to Gray Gaulding here, he can't keep the pace of the field. Oh shoot, never mind, looking at the wrong guy here. Well, Corey LaJoie, I guess it's the exact same thing. His former teammate here also could not. It wasn't as bad as Gaulding. Gaulding was falling far behind, but LaJoie ended up about a lap or two behind the pace. Starting 32nd and 34th. I guess I can get both these guys out of the way because it's kind of the same analysis for both of them. Just don't. With both LaJoie and Gaulding, 32nd and 34th, they're not optimal spots because that's about where they're going to finish. I mean, they're kind of bottom feeders, but they can survive. We saw Gray Gaulding finish 9th at Talladega last year, and that was just because he had I guess he just had a survivor's chance, and all he did was just avoid everything, and he just ended up in, with the crazy amount of cautions that happened last race, he was able to stay on the lead lap because he kept getting the lucky dog and getting shuffled in, and then hung tight and finished on the lead lap. I promise you it wasn't because of his equipment or anything, because Gray Gaulding is trash. You saw his car just going laps behind. Now, could he finish 30 laps behind the pace and just so happen to score well because everyone else crashes? Maybe. And the same could be said about LaJoie. There's just a little bit less upside with LaJoie. Obviously, starting 32nd, but he finished 11th at Daytona last year. That's not shabby. So they're both pretty much the same play. They're kind of plays you want to be, I guess, overweight to the field on if they're going to be like under single digits, but I wouldn't push them past like the 10% or 15% mark unless you want to just take a stand on a guy like, say, I guess Galding would be, you might want a little bit more Galding than LaJoy, but I don't know, because I kind of, like, straight up, I would rather prefer LaJoy over Galding. So they kind of even themselves out that way. But the man stuck in the middle of my analysis here, starting 33rd, is one William Byron. And the way I like to explain to people about how young Willie B is he was born after the movie Titanic came out. So you remember back, if you're like my age, and you remember back when all of your moms were crying and going to the movie theaters over and over to see Jack Alive. Well, he wasn't even born yet. Very, very green, but he was number 1 in practice speed in the second practice. For what it's worth, he looked okay in the duels, I guess. I mean, it was kind of hard to really form any analysis off of him when he started with his teammates, and of course Bowman fell right to the back, and he kind of got shuffled back because he had no one really with him and his side of the aisle, and ended up crashing towards the end there, but was just mid-pack the whole race. Nothing too exciting from the kid. He is going to be a very popular play because his price tag is very friendly at $7,300. He's in that number 24 Chevy, the iconic number 24 Chevy that was given to him by Chase Elliott. I guess I'll put it that way. It was given to him by Chase Elliott so he could ride his dad's number 9. Oh, hello, stomach. How you doing? Yes, I'll get you something for this after this podcast. We got a few guys left to go, so let's get this guy fed here. Let's finish this race here. We've really only got 3 guys left to talk about and a few scrubs. So moving on to Jimmy Johnson, $9,100 and starting 35th. Super obvious chalk, and I love the fact that he crashed at the duels and he crashed at the Clash. It's amazing. I love that. I love it. I know he's on another backup here, but Hendrick's got backup, so I wouldn't worry about it. He leads the field in driver rating at Daytona. He's won several times here. Won them both back in 2013. Runner-up in 2015. Also another top 5 finish in 2015. Since then, he's had some problems. Had a few crashes, and most notably, he's had his 7-year crash streak in the Clash. And they always bring it up in the broadcast, too. Then they brought it up again once he crashed in his duel. And I think a lot of people thought that about Jimmy Johnson anyway. All he does is crash, And I hear it a lot, but it kind of goes underlooked whenever he does well. Like last year he finished 12th at the summer race, or the night race at Daytona. And that's really like your baseline average finish for him. Really, when he's not crashing, he's always going to finish like top 10, if not top 5. He's an extremely good plate racer. And don't forget that. And it's not like Chevys are at a disadvantage to Ford. They're odds-on favorite to win. He's going to move up to the field. He's going to have... I wish he was friendlier with Larson and J-Mac, to be honest. The Ganassi Chevys, but they don't really need them. He's going to start right behind Byron. They're going to slowly work through the field together. And, the Chevys, at least the Hendrick Chevys, historically, they've always just played it kind of safe. And I like that. I like that a bit better than the aggressive Penske-Keselowski kind of route, it's easy enough just to play all of these guys. And like I said earlier, you can just fit all of these guys in a lineup. But if you want to plant your flag and kind of like go in a different direction, I mean, I don't recommend just following exactly what I say here because it's a plate race and anything can happen. I recommend that you just find someone that you think is in a great spot to be contrarian, and then find your chalk guy that you want to get off of and just plant your flags and set your lineups up that way. They don't have to be full on like 100% fade or 100% all in, but just go overweight to the field using the ownership projections on the sheet, on the research station. And yeah, moving on to Matt DiBenedetto. Because, I guess I didn't really finish the analysis on Jimmy Johnson. Got a little sidetracked there, but I really like Jimmy Johnson a lot. I think he's going to come in at like 10% less ownership than Keselowski. So I'm going to jam on that. I'm going to go a bit overweight on Johnson myself. Probably play around 70 to 75%. And yeah, I think he's maybe even a little bit more than that because I just really like him. I know that he's a crash risk. I just don't really buy that. It just so happens to have happened to him over and over. And these crashes aren't like his fault. It's not like he forgot how to drive and just went, oh, fuck, or was being aggressive and cutting people off like Stenhouse. No. He's safe. He's the GOAT. I'm going to roll with him this week. Matt DiBenedetto, another guy I really like, starting 36th. Top 13 finishes, both races last year at Daytona. I wonder if people will remember that. Usually people would just remember him as being a Bristol guy because he had that top 5 finish at Bristol. But I really like Matty B. We've seen him. I think he's also done well at Talladega. Just whenever the fields equalize like this, the DiBurrito can really let himself shine, and hopefully to a tune of under 20% ownership. I don't think he'll. I mean, we have him projected a bit under 20% right now at 19%, but I'm starting to think he might be a little higher owned just because $5,400 and with some of the more expensive guys costing and people possibly wanting to jam 4 studs in there. I don't know. I don't think he's going to be that popular, and really, I think his chances of being in the winning lineup are pretty darn good, starting 36th. If he doesn't crash, which is has a 60% chance to happen, or, well, I guess if you're looking only at guys that start 35th or worse, that's it's even better. It's a 26% chance of them crashing. Yeah, if the other 75% possibility happens and he stays alive, I mean, who knows? He could possibly work his way up, or he might not even need to if it's a crazy week and half the field crashes. So I like him a lot, but I do not like him as much as my boy Eric Almirola in his new Stewart-Haas number 10 Ford, taking over Danica's ride for this year, and he's very used to these Fords, very used to these plate races, very used to doing good at these plate races. Very good. When he's not finishing 34th or worse, which he has 3 times in the last 9 races, full disclosure there. 3 crashes, happens to everybody. When he's not crashing, he's finished top 15 in every race and won in 2014. Most recently, a 4th place finish at last year's Daytona 500. He didn't race the 400. I don't know why I almost said 400 there, but he did not race the 400 when he had that spinal injury last year. He was fully healthy, went back to 100% full health, and even looked good at the end of last year. At plate races, he's even better. He won in the Xfinity Series last year as well. I'm going to be so all over Almirola. Or I guess I'll say it like this. Just thought of this. I'm going to roll out a bunch of Almirola. Oh, you can tell it's I'm getting goofy, but man, I've always loved Almirola. He's always been my go-to punt guy because he's never over-owned. Almost never. Maybe he'll be over-owned this week for sure, but I mean, he's just so obvious. $7,700 in Stewart-Haas equipment now at a track that he just dominates. Oh man, this is gonna be a great play. If he doesn't crash, you're gonna see him riding around the top 10 all day. I just know it. But of course, everyone else kind of knows it too. But compared to guys like Larson or something, I'm not worried about the chalk getting too crazy. So if Almirola is going to be about 30-40%, I want to be about 60-70% on Almirola myself. You could fade him if you want to, and that might be a nice sneak little fade there, and maybe go overweight on William Byron in the 7K range if you want to go that route. But I'm going to be playing a lot of Almirola myself. And then Kyle Larson starting 38th. He is going to be massively owned and mandatory for cash games like a bunch of these guys. $9,300 is pretty cheap for Larson, although he's never been the greatest at plate races. He actually crashed in his first 4 races at Daytona, but he hasn't since, and he actually has a couple of top 10 finishes back in 2016. And he looked all right, honestly, at the Clash. Worked his way up, and then at the duel, he did unfortunately take a little spin there. Got loose in this the way we're starting to see people get loose out there. Someone else, I think it was trying to remember. Oh, it was Larson. Actually, I think it was Larson that he ended up getting loose from getting out of line there and almost took himself a spin, but caught himself. Yeah, it was like in there. I think it was in the first part of like the first duel. I don't remember, but anyway, Larson, absolutely phenomenal smash spot here, starting 38th. He can't score worse than 5 fantasy points, or that isn't great, obviously, but it wouldn't be a total killer, especially with you figure that there will be a bunch of landmines on people's lineups anyways. But if the whole dang field crashes, you probably definitely want Larson. Really, you'd want any of these guys in the back here, but with Larson, he's a good play, even if you don't think about the fact that he's probably very likely to move up to like the top 15 and finish there. And I think he'll go under owned to Keselowski, so I don't really like fading Larson as much as I like Keselowski, because Larson's starting lower and I think he'll get less ownership. So yeah, obviously he's just super chalky. Play him in cash, lock him in cash. And for GPP, I mean, he makes for a great fade, makes for a good play. He doesn't really matter because not much analysis to be made on Larson, just he's starting in the back. Now for the guys that are starting in the very, very back, 2 really, really shitty guys here. Well, one shittier than the other. I'll definitely say one shittier than the other. We got David Gilliland and Mark Thompson. Both in backup cars here. David Gilliland's riding the number 92 Ford for RBR Enterprises, and he'll be back to racing full-time again. Took the year off last year, but he will be racing full-time. He does have to go to a backup car, which sucks for a smaller team like that, but they do have backup cars, being a full-time team, and they should be okay. But with starting 39th, it's all about him surviving anyway, which he can definitely do. He's had some alright finishes at plate races before, but he also has plenty of crashes. I mean, yeah. Last time we saw him at was the second race in 2016. And it's the only race that he's raced in recently, and that he finished 19th. Did pretty well, and I'm pretty sure that if I recall correctly, he started in the back in that race as well. Yeah, he started in 28th, but I don't know. The thing I like about this play the most is obviously that he's starting 39th. Him being in a backup car is a concern, obviously. I don't know how, for ownership, it's really tricky. He could be like 5% owned, but he could also be like almost 20% owned if people just hone in on the guys starting in the back thing. It'll really be telling to see how owned guys like Thompson and Gilliland are, because we do know that Gilliland, it's not like he was falling off of the pace completely, but he had a bit of trouble. Like he was in the back and he definitely wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't like Ty Dillon, where he's a guy that can start in the back and kind of surprisingly work his way up, maybe a David Reagan type, but not really one to do that. But he's a survivor, and he's not going to fall like a million laps behind, but he might fall a few laps behind. Mark Thompson, however, is in a really terrible car, and there's no way I would play him if it weren't for the fact that we're at Daytona and he could just survive his way, Greg Galding style. Now, these guys I'd probably limit my exposure to. With Gilliland, I like to play a bit more, so 20 to 40%. with Gilliland to be overweight on the field. And for Mark Thompson, I'm not sure if you want to be overweight on the field because his car is actually trash, like really bad, but the field might realize this, and him just being at the dead bottom anyway, with there being no one for you to need that amount of savings and salary for, I don't see him being more than like 10% owned. So if you want to, I'd say just like roll like a solid 10% Mark Thompson just in case he survived, because that seems about right. And then if he's over or under the field, I think it'll probably be just a touch over the field then. I guess that feels about right. But hey, if you want to make a stand on him, you could and play like 20, 30%. Who knows? I'd more likely do that on Gilliland than Thompson. But, Thompson technically has the most upside in this race. And, theoretically, if he were to win the race and lead every lap and also be the fastest in every lap, he could theoretically score 235 fantasy points. So it's nice to see someone with a 235 point upside. That's Mark Thompson for you. So yeah, not realistic, and we'll definitely lose tons of fast laps to caution laps. So always remember that. But yeah, Thompson, I'm not quite that bullish on him yet. I'll have to see how he performs here at Daytona. But that'll do your Tacos Fast 40. First actual Fast 40 that added up to 40. First 40 car field of the year. Very excited for it. Although, let's be real, we all wish this was the Tacos Fast 43. Come on. Why'd they have to do it to us? I would love to have 3 extra stragglers each race. And also brings up a point that I wanted to make. If they're gonna change the contest selection and add Xfinity races, I see another change that they're gonna make in the future. Just kind of crystal ball-y here. Right now they have their scoring set up to a field of 43. So your finishing position, 44 minus your finishing position will equal the amount of points that you get for your finishing position. Unless you win and you get an extra 3 points, you get 46. But I could see that all going down by 3, since most fields are 40 and there are never any 43 car fields anymore. And when NASCAR DFS started, it was in the very last season where they used the 43 car fields. So I can see that change coming. I don't know why it hasn't come sooner, but when that comes, I see the meta shifting even further, and already has, and something like place differential becomes even less important. But people have complained about dominator points being way too important, and dominators in general being too important, and kind of wanted to see them, price up the studs a bit and make you have to think a little bit more than just, hit on the guy who gets 500 lead laps, Maybe another change you could possibly make is, moving lead laps down to like 0.1, or it'd be really cool if they could flex it out based on, how many total lead laps or like percentage of laps led or something like that. That would be really cool, but I don't see that change coming. But I do see the change from the 43 to the 40 car fields, but when they're also 38 and 37 car fields sometimes, so who knows? But this is getting a little long-winded now, so I'll let you guys go. Be sure to check out the Domination Station. Run as many lineups as you can, because this is very much a GPP sport. Like I said, cash games this week might be a little bit super extra chalky. But hey, I just one last thing I want to recommend. I can't recommend head-to-heads over 50-50s enough for a week like this, because if you can find one guy that's dumb, or that doesn't know what he's doing and won't play the guys from the back, then you're gonna almost certainly beat him. But if he's in a big group of guys playing a 50-50, then that's not the guy you need to beat, because you'll beat him anyway. You need to beat the guys that know what they're doing. Yeah, I definitely recommend the head-to-heads for that, or even like triple up for those 3-man contests. Those are nice if you can get one guy that doesn't know what he's doing. It makes it pretty much a head-to-head for triple the money, so that's nice. But yeah, I'll let you guys go here. See you guys next week, and good luck. Win all the money. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA, weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.